Have you ever thought about what the world's first globalization looked like? It wasn't powered by the internet or container ships. Instead, it was forged in fire and blood, on the backs of horses, under the command of one of history's most feared and fascinating figures, Genghis Khan. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of the Mongol Empire, a realm that was both a brutal conqueror and an unlikely unifier of worlds. Forget the simple caricature of a barbarian horde. The story is so much more complex, and it shaped the world we live in today in ways you probably never imagined. Let's rewind to the late 12th century. The vast expanse of the Eurasian steppe was a fractured, chaotic patchwork of warring nomadic tribes. Life was harsh, loyalty was fleeting, and survival was a daily struggle. Into this world, a boy named Temujin was born. His early life was a brutal crash course in betrayal and hardship. His father was poisoned, his family was abandoned, and he was even enslaved. But these trials didn't break him. They forged him into a leader of unparalleled charisma, strategic genius, and ruthless determination. Through a series of brilliant alliances and merciless campaigns, Temujin united the disparate Mongol tribes under a single banner. In 1206, at a great assembly known as a Kurultai, he was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. The Mongol war machine was born. Now, let's not sugarcoat this. The Mongol conquests were terrifyingly brutal. Cities that resisted were often razed to the ground, their populations annihilated. Historical accounts speak of pyramids of skulls and rivers running red, from the sophisticated kingdoms of northern China to the rich cities of the Khwarezmian Empire in Central Asia. The Mongol cavalry, with their masterful horsemanship and revolutionary tactics, seemed unstoppable. Their compound bows could outrange their enemies, and their disciplined, decimal-based military structure allowed for incredible coordination on the battlefield. For the people who stood in their way, the arrival of the Mongols was often an apocalyptic event, a storm that swept away entire civilizations. The psychological warfare was just as potent as their physical might. Tales of their ferocity often preceded them, causing entire cities to surrender without a fight. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Once the dust of conquest settled, something entirely new began to emerge from the ruins. Genghis Khan and his successors weren't just destroyers, they were pragmatic and surprisingly effective administrators. They established a code of law called the Yasa, which, among other things, promoted religious tolerance. Whether you were Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, or something else, you were generally free to practice your faith as long as you prayed for the Khan. This was a radical idea in a world often torn apart by religious conflict. This policy wasn't born of some enlightened ideal, but of pure pragmatism. It was simply easier to rule a diverse empire if you didn't force everyone to convert. It kept the peace and kept the tax revenue flowing. This stability created the conditions for what historians call the Pax Mongolica, or the Mongol Peace. For the first time in history, a single power controlled a vast, contiguous landmass stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. This unprecedented security opened up the legendary Silk Road like never before. Before the Mongols, travel along these routes was perilous, subject to countless tolls, bandits, and warring states. Under Mongol rule, it became remarkably safe. The Khans established a sophisticated postal relay system known as the Yam. A network of stations, stocked with fresh horses and supplies, allowed messengers, merchants, and diplomats to travel across the continent with astonishing speed and safety. It was said that a young woman carrying a nugget of gold could travel from one end of the empire to the other without fear of being harmed. This was the Mongol equivalent of a global highway system. And on this highway, it wasn't just silk and spices that traveled. It was ideas, technologies, and cultures. Gunpowder, invented in China, made its way west, where it would fundamentally change the nature of warfare in Europe. The magnetic compass, printing technology, and even playing cards and noodles followed a similar path from the Middle East. Knowledge of medicine, astronomy, and mathematics flowed eastward into China. It was a massive cross-continental exchange of knowledge. Artisans, scholars, and engineers from conquered lands were often spared and relocated to other parts of the empire where their skills were needed. Persian astronomers helped reform the Chinese calendar, while Chinese doctors brought their medical knowledge to Persia. This was a melting pot on an imperial scale. Think of it like this: the Mongol Empire became a vast connector. For a European, China was no longer a land of myth and legend. Merchants like Marco Polo could travel there, live there for years, and return with incredible stories that would ignite Europe's imagination and curiosity about the East. It's no exaggeration to say that these connections helped lay the groundwork for the European Renaissance, the influx of new goods, ideas, and a renewed understanding of the world's geography spurred an age of exploration. Christopher Columbus himself owned a copy of Marco Polo's travels, and it was the dream of reaching the riches of the East, first made accessible by the Mongols, that drove him to sail west. The Mongol-protected trade routes made the world feel smaller and more interconnected than ever before. However, we cannot ignore the dark side of this new global network. Just as goods and ideas traveled freely along the EM system, so did disease. Most historians believe that the Pax Mongolica played a crucial role in the spread of the Black Death. The plague likely originated somewhere in Central Asia and traveled with merchants and armies along the secure trade routes, eventually reaching the Crimea and from there, jumping onto merchant ships bound for Europe. The very system that fostered unprecedented connection also facilitated one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, wiping out a significant portion of the world's population. It's a sobering reminder that globalization, even in its earliest forms, has always had unintended and often devastating consequences. The interconnected world created by the Mongols was a double-edged sword. So, how should we remember Genghis Khan and his empire? As a brutal conqueror responsible for immense destruction? Or as the unifier who created the first great era of global connection? The truth is, he was both. The Mongol Empire is a stark example of how order can be born from chaos, and how destruction can paradoxically lead to creation. It was a brutal, short-lived empire that crumbled within a few generations. But its impact was permanent. It shattered the old world order and redrew the map, both literally and figuratively. It created a bridge between East and West, fostering an exchange of culture and technology that propelled humanity forward, for better and for worse. The story of the Mongols is the story of early globalization, born of war, written on the vast plains of the steppe, and it's a crucial, complex chapter in our shared human history. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this perspective on the Mongol Empire as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the complex stories that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what you think. Was Genghis Khan more of a villain or a visionary? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious.